The new numbers for the USDA supply and demand report, we are going to give you a new estimate, and yet the market's tumbling down in Chicago. Jerry Gidel is ready to assess as always, right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, let's start right away by the markets. The numbers, the prices are lower than the previous week. What do you think is behind that move?
Oh, well, it's kind of the classic approach ahead of reports, and particularly early in the season, and that the trade average estimates came out earlier this week, Tuesday night into Wednesday, and with the trade generally expecting a 1 bushel increase in their national yield, 182, and also 52 and a half, up half a bushel from the USDA's trend line yields. The markets, they've been negative. There's a lot of people been involved in being negative. They short covered a little bit late last week. From there, and then with these numbers, that just kind of, and also the one thing you got a big part of this thing too is the fact that here as we go into the first part of August, we've had 90s and 100-degree temps, and many times in June and July, and here we are in August, and Eastern Corn Belt, I think the highest was 82 or 3 so far in Illinois over the last week or so, and the forecast has modest temperatures. So that's the other thing it adds to it, because of course it is highly important as what our weather will be in the month of August from there. To some extent, the expectations for minimal changes in the carryover stocks for both old and new crop also kind of added to it. So it's the old ho-hum situation. There's no reason to jump in. We've had some announcements this week for soybeans. We've had some big announcements for wheat. We had Egypt come in and supposedly buy 3.6 million metric tons of wheat. We just had another 700,000 for Algeria today on wheat. Yet here we are, just modestly off the lows we've had a couple weeks ago, and that primarily because corn and soybeans crop reports coming out here on Monday. And so no reason to jump in the wheat market, even if there's some positive things going on about demand at this point, because those are some significant kind of numbers. The world is kind of looking at these values as pretty inexpensive. And so I think that's the issue that has prompted their participation here from some of our better buyers. Now, not all of this is really U.S. Like if wheat particularly, it's not a lot of this is wheat directed in the U.S., but we're ahead of last year's wheat purchases from our customers already. Now we're starting to see the world buyers coming in and looking at various purchases, some of it Black Sea, some of it other places. And even this week, we had another update from the European Union about the size of their wheat crop, and that just added to the psychology here that the world wheat supplies are not really gaining much. Even the U.S. is going to have a solid crop this year. So that's the general reason we're here at this point, just kind of hanging back to figure out what's going on with the USDA's numbers. Right now, at least, though, those numbers are going to be interesting because lots of people have really kind of looked at these numbers and the fact it's not 100-degree temps think that everything's hunky-dory. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, and I think the reality in the United States will be quite diverse. We have seen in our own crop tour that the yields were very diverse, but at the same time, we are verifying higher yields, at least in central Illinois. But there are several regions in the country that may offset these numbers. Some reports there are that are a significant drought in the state of Texas right now.
Oh yes, oh yes. Well, that's the thing. The generalities of, in many cases, our investors around the world just look at Illinois or maybe Iowa and say, "Oh, everything's fine in those two states," and they are the two big producing states in corn and soybeans, and that and the wheat crop is to some extent. In the Southwest, the winter wheat crop is pretty well harvested, so well, there's not a lot of excitement going on, but from there. But I got to think that, as you point out, our tour, I came up with I realized that the average tour guesstimate was 213.7 bushels, up about 3.1 bushels from last year's 10 million, 210 million average guess that we came up with. Excuse me. I'm getting confused. There's too many numbers in my head here. It turns out that the last year's final number for Illinois was 206 bushels. The year before that was 214. I definitely think we're going to be higher than the 206 of last year because of the our number comparisons is really 210 against 213, and that, and so that's the way you got to lean at it a little bit here. But as you pointed out, there's other parts of the country here that have not seen the kind of growing season that has been as conducive for an increasing average for Illinois, and there's probably some spots even in Illinois that the crop is not as good as last year. But Ohio is probably about 25-30% behind its moisture levels so far this particular crop season. Southern half of Indiana, the Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. Now, there's not much corn and soybeans in Oklahoma, but there is a lot in eastern Kansas, and there is some eastern areas of Texas that have also have dryland corn. There's a lot of irrigated corn though in Texas, so you don't want to get too shook up if it's dry in the panhandle because they don't end up raising corn in Texas panhandle without irrigation. But as I said, there's even parts of Iowa, the west central and the southwestern districts are probably in the 20% or maybe 25% lower during June and July on precip, and there really hasn't been a lot of rain actually come down in the western corn belt here during the month of August. Now, the key question is in the last 4 or 5 days, and the forecast is that the temperatures are not forecast to be going back up into the 85 or high 80s into the 90s here until the in middle, well, really Thursday, Friday, Saturday of next week, which is virtually a week away. So that's going to be interesting as to how that responds here on things as we get to that after the crop report. Will they focus on what's going to happen with the weather at the end of next week, or will they just say everything's great and who cares if we're not going to hurt our yields? I kind of feel like there's going to be some people, if the average yield is below 182 and below 52.5, that might consider the fact that, well, there's not much more downside in these markets, and maybe they'll take some profits. But it's an interesting world out here these days. A lot of financial issues lying around. Everybody was disappointed that the U.S. didn't drop its interest rates here a week ago, and now they're not so mad about that. So everything's pretty fluid.
Yes, one issue that we kind of skipped in the last couple of weeks was the fact that AgroConsult has found some hundreds of thousands of acres in Brazil that they were not accounting before as planted corn area. So that might bring another 4 million metric tons of output. So that was kind of ignored by the markets, but I think it's pretty big aspect to analyze.
Definitely, you got me choked up here. 4 million metric tons is a big change, and I'm just as in the dark as you were. And to be frank, I didn't even know it happened that they made this adjustment. What particular province was some of this in? Was it in Mato Grosso del Sol, or was it clear up north? And
No, they even they have not mentioned, but they found more acres. It's quite astonishing that they would find the significant
oh,
amount of.
definitely. Is that the government's thing, or is it one of the consultants in South America really run a lot of the show here? They put out a lot of numbers and
Yeah, yes, it's a
uh,
private consultancy,
oh, which what was the name again?
AgroConsult.
Oh, agricultural. Yeah, yeah, they're good. They have a lot of information and they have a lot of distribution, so they have an impact in that. I missed that particular update. I guess it was still had my head buried in all these data coming from our crop tour that we took around the Midwest. And I think the other twist of this thing that's also got lost a little bit, and I don't want to belabor the fact that sometimes the average trade guest doesn't always look at some of the issues that are out there. The USDA has already announced that they're going to be looking at Northwest Iowa and Southwest Minnesota and Southeast South Dakota, looking at both corn and soybean acres because of that big flood that we had just before the June 28th USDA acreage report. So it's not going to make major numbers in this thing, but it's just another thing that kind of comes into it. And the other twist of this thing is that all the consultants that want to throw out their numbers for the crop size here, uh, the thing the USDA is going to have to use for their numbers is really just the producer survey that they start in August, and one of the classic scenarios in U.S. data is that the farmer is pretty conservative on his yield estimate until he gets in the field and actually starts harvesting the corn. And since we've had some erratic weather and hot weather in June and July, he might not be anticipating the big yields on trends that the USDA has already put out, and all these private people throw in the numbers too. So that's another twist. Maybe that's the reason why I'm kind of hanging out on the low side on these things, anticipating that there might be a little bit less enthusiasm from the farmers out there and their data when they put together the stuff for the August report that will be out on Monday at 11 o'clock.
All right, we'll check and let's see what happens with the USDA report. Thank you, Jerry.
Exactly. That's going to be an interesting one. And we'll see if the market thinks it's maybe oversold and we can get a little correction here, but it's down at long-term support. So we'll see what that happens to. Have a good evening.
Thank you.